The fog had settled low that Monday morning, curling like a lazy snake through the parking lot of Riverstone Transit. It was the kind of morning that didn't rush you, where commuters clutched steaming coffees and dragged their feet as if the world owed them 5 more minutes of sleep. Riverstone wasn't the kind of place where things happened. Not really. It was the sleepy buffer zone just outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of town whose biggest scandal was a late bus. But today, the fog wasn't just clinging to the asphalt, it was cloaking a secret. Officer Dana Blake leaned against her patrol cruiser, a half-eaten protein bar in one hand and a worn leash in the other. The leash led to a grizzled German shepherd named Trooper. His coat was speckled with silver, his eyes sharp, his stance deliberate. He wasn't fast anymore. He didn't chase like he used to. But when he stared, you paid attention. Trooper wasn't just any dog. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, sniffing out explosives, alerting soldiers of hidden traps, and on more than one occasion saving lives by sheer instinct. After years in service and 2 in quiet retirement, he'd been brought back into action under a local pilot program, a sort of low-risk patrol partner. And he'd been paired with Dana, a military veteran herself, calm-eyed, mid-30s, the kind of officer who didn't waste words. Their bond wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Overhead, the station's PA system crackled with announcements that no one really listened to. A woman wrestled a stroller while her toddler squealed at pigeons. 2 teens argued over who stole whose earbuds. It was the kind of normal that made you let your guard down. And then it wasn't. Trooper stopped mid-stride. Dana didn't have to say anything. She saw the change immediately, the way his ears stood at attention, how his body turned rigid, his tail dropping like a weight. Then came the sound that sent a jolt through her gut, a growl, deep and rumbling. Not a warning bark, not curiosity. It was a combat growl. The kind Trooper used when something wasn't just wrong, it was alive. "Troop?" Dana said, following his gaze. Trooper lunged, dragging Dana forward, his nose scraping the concrete as he homed in on something under one of the wooden benches. A suitcase, maroon, scuffed, one busted wheel, sat quietly as if it had always been there. But Trooper wasn't buying it. There was no tag, no owner nearby. And Dana didn't need her training to know this wasn't a drill. Trooper started scratching at the suitcase, but not like he did with narcotics, and not like the methodical way he alerted to explosives. This was wild, urgent, desperate. "Okay," Dana muttered. "That's not right." She snapped her head toward a nearby transit officer. "Clear the platform. Get everyone back now." The man blinked at her, surprised. "Bomb threat?" "Could be," Dana said, eyes locked on Trooper. "Could be worse." Commuters began to scatter. Confused glances bounced off one another as people backed away. Dana kept one hand on her holstered weapon and another near Trooper's collar. The dog whined, then growled again, pawing at the suitcase with more force. And then he stopped. He sat down, stiff, silent, his eyes locked on the suitcase like it was haunted. Dana's chest tightened. Trooper hadn't acted like this since their last deployment. Since Kabul. She pressed her radio. "Dispatch, this is 7 Charlie 6. Possible threat. I need backup, bomb squad, and Child Protective Services on standby." Child Protective Services? She didn't even realize why she said it. Dana crouched, her knees popping softly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Talk to me, buddy. What is it?" And then she heard it. A whimper. So faint she wasn't sure it was real. Her eyes swept the platform. No one else reacted. But then she heard it again. Not a dog. Not an adult. A child. Dana's breath caught. She stepped closer to the suitcase. Trooper whimpered too, as if he couldn't bear what he was sensing. "Oh, God," Dana whispered. "There's someone in there." Protocol screamed at her not to move. The bomb squad was still minutes away. If the suitcase was rigged and she acted now, she'd be responsible for everything. But then the suitcase moved. Just an inch. Just enough. Dana's instinct slammed back into overdrive. She drew her weapon, turning to the bystanders near the fence. "Everyone stay back," she barked. Trooper pawed the suitcase again, then barked, twice. Short, sharp. Human life detected. That was his signal. Dana didn't wait. She dropped to her knees, heart hammering, and unzipped the suitcase. The zipper fought her, metal teeth grinding in protest. And then a wave of smell, sweat, duct tape, mildew. She gagged. Then she saw it. A sneaker, small, pink and yellow, and then eyes, wide, terrified. A boy, No older than 4, mouth taped, wrists bound, knees tucked to chest like a folded paper doll, alive. Jesus, Dana breathed. She reached in, pulled the child out. He didn't scream, didn't cry, he just shivered in her arms. Trooper licked the boy's hand gently. Dana's voice cracked on the radio. "This is Blake. We have a live child. Repeat, a live child. Abducted. Request ambulance and immediate trauma response. I am holding the child now." The boy's eyes met hers. They were hollow, deep, like he hadn't seen kindness in a long time. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, ripping the tape from his mouth, her hands shaking. "You're safe. We've got you. You're safe now." Paramedics arrived in 2 minutes. The boy was rushed towards St. Mary's Pediatric ER. Dana wouldn't let anyone else ride in the ambulance but her and Trooper. And the dog? He never once looked away from the boy. At Riverstone Transit, investigators gathered around the suitcase with a single burning question. Who the hell zipped a living child inside? There were no prints, no ID, no tag. But Trooper had caught a scent, and wherever it led, Dana was going to follow. The ambulance cut through the morning traffic with its siren wailing, a high-pitched scream echoing against quiet streets. Inside, Officer Dana Blake sat rigid beside the stretcher. One hand gripped the rail, the other gently rested on Trooper's back. The German shepherd's amber eyes were locked on the boy, unblinking, unmoving, as if holding vigil. The child hadn't spoken a word. He clutched Dana's sleeve with tiny fingers, not out of comfort, but as if it were the only thing tethering him to the world. He was too quiet. 4-year-olds should squirm, should cry, should ask a million questions. But this boy was hollow. No tears, no sound, no name. Dana kept glancing at him as the EMT checked his vitals. In her mind, the same questions circled like buzzards. How long had he been in that suitcase? Who would do that to a child? And why hadn't anyone reported him missing? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the spiral. She answered without looking. "Talk to me," she said. Detective Ray Moreno's voice was grim. "We pulled the security footage from the station." Dana braced herself. "Don't tell me I'm going to hate it." "You're going to hate it." She sighed. "Go on." Timestamp 5:42 a.m. Someone in a grey hoodie placed the suitcase under the bench. Camera doesn't catch their face. No plate on the vehicle. Just a bus pulling away after. Dana's jaw clenched. "Any leads?" "We're running image enhancement, tracking down the bus manifest." But this wasn't panic, Dana. Whoever did this, they were calm. That suitcase was zipped up like they'd done it before. Her stomach dropped. "Like this wasn't their first time," she whispered. Ray paused. "Just a theory. But yeah, that's what it looks like." She looked down at the boy, now under an oxygen mask. His eyes were open, but unfocused. "We'll talk more at the hospital." When the ambulance arrived at St. Mary's, the ER team was already waiting. Nurses, techs, trauma staff, they moved like a single organism surrounding the stretcher, pushing it through the white-lit halls. Dana and Trooper followed until they reached the line marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Dana stopped. Trooper didn't. He tried to push through, whining when the automatic door closed between him and the boy. Dana knelt beside him, whispering, "It's okay. You did your job. You found him. Let them take care of him now." But Trooper wouldn't sit. He stared at the door, still and alert, his tail stiff. Back in the waiting room, Dana sat alone. The scent of antiseptic mixed with burnt vending machine coffee. Overhead, a muted TV cycled through breaking news footage. Boy found in suitcase, suspect at large. She hated how fast the press had jumped in. They always got the facts wrong. They never talked about how it felt, the way the suitcase had moved, the sound of the child's breath under the duct tape, the way Trooper had sat like a statue, knowing something was wrong before anyone else. She rubbed her temples, eyes drifting to Trooper, who now lay facing the hallway, still alert. That's when Dr. Megan Price appeared. "Officer Blake?" Dana stood. "That's me." Dr. Price looked tired but composed. "The boy is stable. Dehydrated, hypothermic, bruising on his wrists and ankles consistent with binding, but no broken bones, no internal bleeding." Dana exhaled. "Did he say anything?" Dr. Price hesitated. "He hasn't spoken a word. He responds to touch and light, but no name, no verbal interaction." Dana nodded. "Can I see him?" Dr. Price motioned toward the hallway. "Yes, but keep it calm. We're trying not to overwhelm him." Inside the hospital room, the boy lay curled on his side, clean gown, arms tucked tight against his chest. His face looked better, washed, soothed, but his eyes were still distant. He hadn't come back yet. Not really. Dana approached slowly and sat beside the bed. "Hey there," she whispered. "Remember me? I'm Dana, and this big guy is Trooper. He helped find you." The boy didn't respond, but when Trooper stepped inside the room and laid his chin on the bed's edge, something shifted. The boy blinked. Then, softly, cautiously, he reached out and touched the dog's ear. He didn't speak, he didn't smile, but he moved. And in that moment, Dana saw the first flicker of something whole still inside him. Back at the station, Ray Moreno sat hunched over grainy footage. Burnt coffee in hand, he scrubbed back and forth through the video, eyes narrowed. Something about the way the person in the hoodie moved. It was smooth, calculated, like they knew exactly where the camera was and how to avoid it. He paused the feed, zoomed in on a single frame, just before the figure turned away. A bracelet, pink and white, woven, homemade, on the left wrist. He grabbed his phone and called Dana. "Yeah," she answered, her voice quiet. "I've got something," he said. "Not a face, but a clue. Whoever left the suitcase was wearing a pink and white friendship bracelet." Dana furrowed her brow. "So, female? Possibly. Or someone trying really hard to look like one," Ray said. "And we ran facial recognition. No matches. Whoever this is, they're not in the system." She sighed. "You think they're still nearby?" "Unlikely. The bus that pulled away? Eastbound, 5:45 a.m. She's probably long gone." That night, Dana brought Trooper home. She brewed tea but let it go cold on the counter. Her thoughts kept circling the boy's face, those hollow eyes, that silent trust. Then her phone buzzed again. No number, no contact info, just a message. "I did what I had to. He's safer now. Don't look for me." She froze. The message was untraceable. No metadata, just words, final and absolute. She stared at the screen. Then at Trooper. He growled, not at her, toward the door. A soft thump. Barely a sound. But Trooper stood, body stiff, ears forward. Dana's hand moved to her weapon. "Trooper," she whispered, inching toward the window. The porch light flickered. Outside, the street was quiet. No footsteps, no movement. Just a breeze rattling the leaves and the occasional hum of a distant car. Trooper didn't relax. Instead, he walked slowly to the door, nose low to the ground. He sniffed, then froze. Dana opened the door slowly. A package, plain, brown, no tape, no address. Trooper sniffed it and pulled back slightly. Dana crouched. No ticking, no leaking, but the air around it felt deliberate. She slipped on gloves, opened the lid. Inside, a crayon drawing of a boy and a dog. A single pink sock. A photo of the child, sleeping on a blue couch surrounded by stuffed animals. He looked peaceful, too peaceful. Behind the photo, a handwritten note in block letters. "I kept him safe. Now it's your turn." Dana's chest tightened. Whoever this was, they knew where she lived. They'd been close enough to leave this at her door, but it wasn't a threat. It was a handoff, a plea wrapped in fear, and maybe love. The sun hadn't risen yet when Dana arrived back at the hospital. Her eyes were bloodshot, her mind foggy with everything that had unfolded in just 24 hours. Trooper walked at her side, as usual, his movements slower but never uncertain. They were both exhausted, but they had no intention of slowing down. The boy, still nameless, had spent the night under careful watch. Nurses had taken to calling him Buddy, a placeholder for the name he hadn't spoken. Dana paused outside his room, where Trooper immediately sat at attention, eyes fixed on the door like a sentry. Inside, the boy lay in bed, clutching a stuffed bear someone on staff had given him. He didn't sleep much, just stared at the ceiling, small hands occasionally twitching against the blanket. When Dr. Price spotted Dana, she walked over, chart in hand. "We ran a tox screen," she said. "Nothing out of the ordinary. No sedatives, no traces of drugs or substances, but we did find something else." Dana straightened. "What? He's not registered in any public school system in the Tri-County area. No pediatric medical records, no birth certificate, nothing in the National Missing Children's Database. It's like he doesn't exist." "You're saying," Dana began. Dr. Price nodded. "We don't think he was ever reported missing." The words hung in the air like a hammer waiting to fall. Dana turned slowly, her stomach churning. "So someone hid him, his whole life." "Looks that way." Later that day, Dana returned to her squad room. The air inside felt colder than usual. Detective Ray Moreno was already there, standing in front of a pin-covered corkboard with photographs, maps, and printouts. At the center, taped directly under a photo of the suitcase, were 3 words scrawled in red marker. Not the first time. "We found something in the suitcase lining," Ray said, not turning around. He handed Dana a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was a torn piece of cloth, frayed around the edges, but one detail stood out: a faded name tag. "M. Hollis," Dana blinked. "You think that's the boy's name?" "Either that," Ray said, "or it belonged to someone who meant something to him." Dana typed the name into the system. No hits. No child. No guardian. Nothing. Ray rubbed his temples. "I also traced the bus route the suspect might have taken after the drop. If she stayed on it, she'd be in Oak Ridge by now. That's 2 counties east." Dana frowned. "You think she went that far?" "She's good," Ray replied. "Knows how to stay off-grid. I'm driving out there. You should stay here. If she dropped that box at your house, she's watching either him or you." Dana nodded slowly. "Be careful." That afternoon, Dana returned to the hospital and took a seat next to the boy's bed. He was awake, watching the rain streak across the window. A tray of untouched applesauce and pudding sat nearby. Trooper curled up at his feet, breathing slow and steady. "Hey," Dana said softly, "you ever been in a police car before? It's not that exciting. Sirens are loud. Trooper loves it, though." The boy didn't react. Dana reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the crayon drawing from the package left at her door. She smoothed it on the blanket, placing it within his line of sight. "Did you draw this?" she asked. A blink, fingers twitched. "That's you, right?" she said gently. "And the dog?" Long silence. Then in a whisper so faint she almost missed it, the boy said, "Scout?" Dana froze. Her heart thudded in her chest. "Scout," she repeated. He nodded. His voice cracked. "Was Scout your dog?" Dana asked. He shook his head. "No," he whispered. "He was hers, but he let me ride on his back sometimes. She said it was okay, said he was old but still strong." Dana's throat tightened. "Do you remember her name?" She asked, but the boy only looked down. After a moment she tried again. "Do you remember what she called you?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, with a little more strength, he whispered, "Miles." Dana's eyes widened. She leaned back slightly, taking in the name like it was sacred. The boy, M. Hollis. Finally, he had a name. Later that evening, Ray called from Oak Ridge. His voice was tight, urgent. "I think I found the drop point. About 6 miles from the last bus stop. There's a cabin, burned out. Local hikers reported smoke 2 days ago. Fire crews said it was mostly paper and fabric." Dana paced the hallway outside Miles's room. "Anything left?" "There's more," Ray said. "Drawings, like the one from the box, pinned to the walls, same kid, same dog. There was a mattress on the floor, kids' shoes, toys." He paused. "Dana, this wasn't just a place to hide. This was his home." Her heart sank. "Then why abandon it?" she asked. "Maybe someone was closing in." Ray offered. Or maybe she knew she couldn't run forever. The next morning, Dana arrived at the station and opened her mailbox. Inside was a plain envelope, no stamp, no return address, just her name written in tight, neat handwriting. Inside, a photograph. A woman with soft eyes and sun-dusted freckles stood beside Miles in a field of wildflowers. He looked different, healthier, smiling. His little hand was wrapped tightly in hers. Dana turned the photo over. One handwritten sentence on the back. "He called me Mama, but I wasn't just someone who tried to be." She stared at the words. Read them once, then again, and again. The line didn't read like a confession. It read like a surrender. And still, the same woman had zipped a boy inside a suitcase. What kind of rescuer does that? Dana stood up and stepped outside her office. Trooper was waiting by the cruiser, tail thumping once against the concrete. She held out the photo. He sniffed it, then lifted his nose toward the wind. His ears perked. Somewhere out there the scent was still alive. "Come on, partner," Dana murmured. "Let's go ask some hard questions." They reached Oak Ridge just after noon. The town was quiet, tucked between wooded hills and forgotten highways, a scattering of diners, pawn shops and shuttered storefronts that hadn't seen a renovation since the early 90s. People here waved at cops out of habit, but they watched from behind their curtains just the same. It was the kind of place where secrets could sleep undisturbed for years. Ray met Dana near the trailhead just outside town. The air was sharp with pine and smoke, and a light wind rustled the canopy overhead. A dirt path disappeared into the forest, marked only by flattened grass and an occasional boot print. The fire crew cleared the place, Ray said, adjusting his vest, but no one's touched it since. Dana looked up the path, her boots already sinking slightly into the damp earth. Do I look ready? Ray smirked. Never do. They started the hike. 20 minutes through winding brush and tall trees, the world slowly fell into silence. No traffic, no voices, only birdsong, and even that faded the deeper they went. Trooper stayed just ahead of them, alert, tail low, sniffing with deliberate steps. Then the trees broke open. In the clearing stood what remained of a cabin, pieced together with scrap wood, a tin roof patched in places, and a sagging porch that creaked under the breeze. Smoke still curled faintly from a chimney pipe. Someone had been here recently. Dana slowed, drawing her weapon. Ray mirrored her. They hadn't taken more than 3 steps forward when a voice called from inside the cabin. You can put your guns down. I'm not going to run. It was a woman's voice. Calm, tired, familiar. Dana's breath caught. She stepped forward slowly. From the shadows of the doorway emerged a woman, her hair pulled back, face pale and thin, freckles barely visible under the grime and exhaustion. She looked older than the photo. Years older. Her eyes, though, were unmistakable. Camilla Raines. She raised her hands. You found him, didn't you? Dana nodded. He's safe. Camilla's lips trembled, just for a second. Good, she whispered. That's all I ever wanted. Ray stepped forward and gently cuffed her wrists. She didn't resist. She didn't flinch. As they walked her toward the car, she looked at Dana. I knew someone would come, eventually, but I had to give him a chance. Dana studied her. Why the suitcase, Camilla? Camilla stopped. Her voice cracked. Because I was being followed. Someone knew where we were. I panicked. I didn't have time. And I knew the only way he'd be found quickly was if a K9 noticed. It was stupid, but it was all I had left. That night, back at the hospital, Dana sat alone in the hallway outside Miles's room. The overhead lights buzzed softly, casting sterile shadows on the floor. A nurse had tucked Miles in, set a sound machine to play ocean waves, and dimmed the lights. Trooper sat beside the door, unmoving as always. Dana scrolled through her notes, trying to stitch facts into clarity. Camilla's confession had been raw, honest, but that didn't erase what she'd done. You don't leave a child zipped inside a suitcase, no matter how good your intentions. Still, Dana couldn't ignore the way Miles had at that woman in the photo. The trust in his eyes. The familiarity. Camilla hadn't just found him. She had raised him. The next morning in court, the hearing was quiet. No press. No cameras. Just tired public defenders and overworked court clerks moving through the docket like machines. Camilla stood before the judge in a plain grey sweatshirt, hands cuffed in front of her, voice steady. I didn't take him to hurt him, she said. I took him because no one else would listen, because I knew if I left him there, he wouldn't survive. She didn't beg. She didn't weep. She just told the truth. In the back row, Dana sat with Miles on her lap, clean, fed, and finally smiling. Trooper lay at their feet, tail thumping softly every time someone glanced their way. The prosecutor recommended leniency. The judge agreed, ordering a psychological evaluation, community service, and temporary placement of Miles into protective custody. But then came the twist Dana hadn't expected. The court-appointed advocate leaned toward her and whispered, "The board is willing to consider your home if you're open to fostering him until final placement." Dana blinked. Me? The advocate nodded. You've been with him from the beginning. You're vetted. He trusts you. Dana looked down at Miles. He was already looking up at her. He didn't speak. He just reached out, took her hand and nodded, like he already knew what she was going to say. In the weeks that followed, Dana's small 2-bedroom house transformed. Toys accumulated in corners. Crayon drawings began appearing on the fridge. Trooper had more fur on the carpet than ever before. Miles wasn't talkative, but he didn't need to be. He started calling Dana D, and Trooper? Just T. They were short names. Easy to whisper in the dark when nightmares came, easy to call when thunderstorms rolled in. Trooper became his shadow, following him from room to room, sleeping at the foot of his bed, always positioning himself between the boy and any open door. It wasn't just instinct, it was devotion. And slowly Miles began to heal. He laughed when Trooper barked at the vacuum cleaner, he grinned when Dana let him pick out his own lunchbox, and he stopped drawing the suitcase. Now his drawings were of open fields, sunshine, sometimes a small house with a tin roof and a dog named Scout. One Saturday morning, as Dana poured coffee, her phone buzzed. It was Ray. "You might want to turn on the news." She clicked the TV. Channel 6 was reporting breaking news. State agency under investigation after child custody files linked to failed case resurface. Ray's voice came through the phone. Whistleblower from Family Services dropped a full audit. Turns out, Camila's claims, they weren't just emotional. They were factual. Dana sat down slowly. Miles's father, Martin Hollis, had 2 sealed reports for child endangerment. The judge who had granted him custody had quietly retired. "So what happens now?" Dana asked. "There'll be an inquiry. Charges against Camila will likely be dropped." Dana looked at the framed photo on her mantel, Miles and Trooper on the porch. For once, peaceful. That afternoon, with the court's approval and guidance from a therapist, Dana brought Miles to a park to meet Camila. She was waiting on a bench, holding a stuffed bear and a worn copy of Scout and the Big Brave Day. Miles didn't say anything at first. Then he ran to her, held her tight. "You did keep me safe," he said. Camila smiled through her tears. "I tried, baby." Dana sat nearby, watching quietly. Trooper's head rested on her thigh. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and for Miles that was enough. The courthouse building didn't look like the ones in movies. There were no grand marble staircases or dramatic protests outside. Just a faded brick facade, flickering fluorescent lights, and rows of people with tired eyes clutching manila folders and styrofoam coffee cups. Inside, Dana waited in the Family Services wing, seated across from Janice Henley, a veteran caseworker who had seen it all and no longer had the energy to pretend otherwise. Henley flipped open an old file. Her expression didn't change as she scanned the pages. "I remember this one," she said flatly. Dana leaned forward. "You remember Miles?" Henley nodded. "And Camila. It was a mess from the beginning. Walk me through it." Henley sighed. Miles was placed in emergency custody after a domestic violence incident involving his biological father, Martin Hollis. It wasn't made public, very hush-hush. No media, no press release. But here's the kicker. Martin had a sealed abuse record from a prior custody case. Dana blinked. "Wait, you're telling me the court gave custody to a man with a sealed abuse file?" Henley gave a bitter chuckle. "You'd be surprised how many red flags get buried under bureaucracy. Sealed documents, clerical delays, outdated systems. It's a perfect storm for letting the wrong people through." Dana's fingers dug into her thigh. "And Camila?" "She tried to intervene. She was Miles's half-aunt through his mother's side. No legal claim, no custody rights, but she begged us to investigate. The problem? She had no permanent residence, no family support, no job history that would stand up in court, and no one else from the family would testify. Her hands were tied before she even showed up." "Did you believe her?" Henley looked up, eyes suddenly sharper. "I wanted to. But what I believe doesn't matter in that system. What we could prove, that's what did." Dana sat back, her stomach churning. "So what happened after custody was given back to the father?" Henley's voice dropped. "They disappeared. A few weeks later, just gone. No trace. No follow-up, no Amber Alert. I always suspected Camila took him, but I couldn't prove it, couldn't report it. All I had was a theory and a gut feeling." Outside the building, Dana leaned against her cruiser, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Trooper sat by her feet, sensing her tension but staying quiet. She stared at the line of trees across the street, wind shaking their branches, her mind racing. Camila hadn't kidnapped the boy. She'd rescued him. But it still didn't explain everything. Why leave him in a suitcase? She climbed into the cruiser and called Ray. "You're not going to believe this," she said. She laid it all out. Henley's testimony, the custody history, the sealed records, the system that had failed so profoundly that a woman was forced to vanish with a child to save his life. Ray exhaled. "So she's been raising him off-grid for nearly 5 years?" "Looks that way." He went quiet for a long beat. Then his voice dropped. "There's something else. Remember that number the clinic receptionist gave us, from the post-it note Camila left behind?" "Yeah? We got a ping, burned phone. Last active 72 hours ago. Guess where?" Dana's heart skipped. "Where?" "Raven's Hollow, just north of the National Forest." Her pulse spiked. "That's deep woods. Exactly. Perfect place to disappear." The drive to Raven's Hollow took 2 hours. As the road wound deeper into the wilderness, the GPS dropped out. Cell service vanished. Dana's hands tightened on the wheel. Beside her, Trooper sat up straighter, his nose twitching, ears rotating like antenna. They met Ray at the edge of an overgrown trailhead. No signage, no paths, just endless forest, thick and silent. "You sure she's out here?" Dana asked. Ray didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I've got a feeling," and Trooper seems to agree. The dog barked once, then took off into the trees. They followed him. Half a mile in, the trail opened into a clearing. There, half hidden beneath trees and overgrown vines, stood another cabin, makeshift, patched with whatever materials could be scavenged. A tin roof, smoke curling faintly from a stovepipe, a pile of firewood neatly stacked outside. Someone was home. Dana drew her weapon. Ray mirrored her. Before they could call out, a voice rang from the doorway. "You can put your guns down. I'm not running." Camila stood in the doorway, hands raised. She looked thinner, weaker, her face pale beneath sunken cheeks, but her eyes were steady, resigned. "You found him," she said again. Dana nodded. "He's safe." Camila's voice broke. "That's all I wanted." Ray cuffed her gently. She didn't fight. As they led her toward the cruiser, Dana asked, "Why now? Why the suitcase?" Camila stopped walking. Her voice was raw. "Because someone was following us. I don't know who. Maybe someone who knew Martin. I panicked. I knew I couldn't outrun them, but I knew where K9 dogs were patrolling. I figured maybe a dog would find him faster than anyone else." She paused. I had to believe someone would listen this time. That night, back at the hospital, Miles was asleep, curled around his stuffed bear. Trooper lay under his bed, eyes half shut, but always watching. Dana sat in the hallway, rereading Camila's file. She had nothing, no job, no family, no support, and yet she'd raised the boy with drawings and fairy tales and a dog named Scout. She had failed in so many ways, and yet, in the most important way, she hadn't failed at all. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it whispered. 2 weeks later, Camila stood in court again. The hearing was different this time. No shackles, no press, just a quiet room and a tired judge. The prosecutor motioned to dismiss all remaining charges. The judge nodded. "Miss Rains," he said, "while your actions were unlawful, the court recognizes the systemic failures that led to them. We will order supervised release and full evaluation." Camila didn't cry. She just said, "Thank you." Outside, Miles waited with Dana and Trooper at a small park. When Camila approached, he ran to her without hesitation. She hugged him tight, then stepped back and looked him over. "You did keep me safe," he said quietly. She smiled. "I tried." Dana stood at a distance, watching as Trooper laid his head on her thigh. The moment didn't need anything more. No speeches, no headlines. It wasn't about who had been right. It was about who had stayed. The auditorium at Riverstone Town Hall was packed. Folding chairs filled every corner of the room, and people lined the walls, murmuring quietly. Some were there out of curiosity, others out of respect. At the front of the stage stood the mayor, a balding man better known for cutting ribbons than giving speeches. He tapped the microphone nervously, his voice slightly too loud as it echoed across the chamber. "Today," he began, "we recognize Officer Dana Blake and K9 Trooper for extraordinary service and heroism. But more than that, we recognize the power of instinct, the strength of compassion, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and a dog who refused to give up on each other." The crowd erupted into applause. Dana didn't walk to the mic. She didn't say anything. She simply knelt beside Trooper, who now wore a blue ribbon and a shiny new tag on his collar, and whispered, "You saved him. You saved us both." And then Miles ran onto the stage. He didn't say anything either. He just hugged them both, his arms wrapped around Trooper's neck, his small face buried in Dana's shoulder. The crowd stood and clapped again, but neither Dana nor Miles noticed. In that moment, the world shrank to just the three of them. That night, the town lights dimmed and the crowds disappeared, but in a quiet house a few blocks away, life was just beginning to settle into something real. Dana tucked Miles into bed. He was already half asleep, curled on his side with his stuffed bear in the crook of his arm. The soft hum of ocean waves played from the sound machine on the nightstand. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "You ever scared any more?" she whispered. He shook his head slowly, his eyes still closed. "Because of Trooper," he mumbled. Then, after a pause, "because I know I'm not lost anymore." Dana smiled. brushing a stray hair from his face. "You were never lost, kid. You were just waiting to be found." In the weeks that followed, life grew warmer, fuller. Dana's house, once quiet and sparse, became lived in. There were puzzles spread across the coffee table, sketchbooks stacked on the kitchen counter, and dog fur absolutely everywhere. Miles wasn't chatty, but he didn't need to be. He had names for everything now. D for Dana, T for Trooper. Short syllables. Easy to whisper when he woke up from a nightmare or crawled onto the couch during a thunderstorm. Trooper was always there. Like gravity, like breath. He followed Miles from room to room, slept under his bed, waited patiently during bath time, and stood guard by the door when strangers came near. It wasn't just loyalty. It was purpose, and Miles changed too. He laughed more. He beamed when Dana took him shopping for school supplies and let him choose his own backpack. He picked one with stars and rocket ships, said it reminded him of how far people can go. But the drawings were the real change. He no longer sketched suitcases or shadows. Now his crayon worlds were filled with sunshine, wide-open fields, tall trees, and a little cabin with a tin roof. A stick-figure dog named Scout sat on the porch. Sometimes there were wildflowers. Sometimes a woman with soft eyes and messy hair stood in the doorway. One Saturday morning, as Dana poured herself a second cup of coffee, the phone rang. It was Ray. "You might want to turn on the news," he said. She clicked on the TV. Channel 6 had breaking coverage. State agency under investigation following internal audit tied to 2019 child custody failure. A whistleblower had submitted a complete report, an internal review revealing multiple failures in the Hollis case. Dana's eyes widened as she listened. Miles's father, Martin Hollis, had not only had a sealed abuse report, but two, both improperly handled, both ignored. The judge who had granted him custody had quietly retired the year after. Dana lowered the volume and stared at the screen. Her pulse slowed like something heavy had finally lifted. "So what happens now?" she asked Ray over the phone. "There'll be a formal inquiry. Most likely, all charges against Camila will be dropped." Dana looked over at the mantel. A photo sat there, Miles and Trooper, side by side on the porch, the evening sun turning their silhouettes gold. They looked content, safe. Finally. A week later, Camila was officially released under supervision. She declined every interview request, ignored the press, and melted quietly into the background, just as she had lived for years. But one afternoon, with the therapist's approval and Dana's quiet blessing, she met with Miles again. They chose a quiet park. Camila wore a soft cardigan and held a stuffed bear in one hand and a tattered, well-worn book in the other. Scout and the Big Brave Day. When Miles saw her, he didn't say anything at first. He just ran to her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and held on. They stood there a long time. Then he looked up and whispered, "You did keep me safe." Camila smiled, brushing his hair from his face. "I tried, baby." Dana watched from a bench nearby, Trooper's head resting in her lap. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real one. 1 month later, Dana sat in the back of her cruiser parked across from the hospital. The engine was off. The only sound was Trooper snoring lightly in the back seat, his paw twitching like he was chasing something in his dreams. Dana stared at her laptop screen. She had dug into every record system she could find. No birth certificate for Miles Hollis. No school enrollment. No immunization reports. Nothing that confirmed he had ever existed in the way the world measures such things. But then, in an old child welfare archive, she found it. A redacted file, buried deep in a legacy system. Name, Miles Hollis, DOB unknown. Custodial status, protective custody. Transfer, 29 case ID, redacted. Parent guardian, Rains Camila, maternal relative, non-custodial. Status, closed, discontinued. She stared at the screen until her eyes burned. Miles had existed. He had been documented. He had just disappeared between the cracks. That knowledge didn't make her feel better, but it made her feel responsible. The next morning, Dana took Miles to school for the first time. He clung to her hand the whole way to the front gate, backpack slung over both shoulders, lunchbox clutched tight. Trooper walked beside them like an escort. When it came time to let go, Miles turned and whispered, "You'll still be here?" Dana nodded. Always. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He just gave her a tiny smile and walked through the doors. Later that day, Dana drove to Riverstone Transit, just to walk through it. just to remember. It had started there with a growl, a fog, and a forgotten suitcase. Now people at the station stopped her to say thank you. They bent down to pet Trooper. They told her that she and the dog had saved a boy's life. But the truth was simpler. They had found a boy who had never been lost. He had just been waiting for someone to listen.